start.
Beautiful. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be with all of you once again, even if it's very difficult circumstances. We also delighted to see that the Psalms class is providing some source of inspiration and perhaps calmness and consolation during this very, very, very difficult period. I want to make sure that you are aware of maybe Devi, you can speak more about this on the 14th of November. Is that right? That we're going to be in the central Pennsylvania. There's going to be an event on behalf of the relief for the state of Israel. I'm going to be participating in it. And so there are a number of different congregations around the area. Debbie, would you like to say something more about that?
Yes, so it's the local central Pennsylvania synagogues that are participating, that are within the legacy program, and just the synagogues in general. And they had asked if Cantor Ramón would participate, and he gladly said yes. So we sent that out in the Agudagram, I believe, yesterday, and we will be sending more information about that so that everyone can tune into that on Zoom as well.
Yeah,
So
if anyone needs the link, email us and we'll send it out for that as well, if you don't have it. It's Tuesday at 7 p.m., November 14th. So that's.
Yes. I also happy to hear that Debbie was there last night on the live stream of Washington Hebrew Congregation here in Washington, D.C., where we had another event sponsored on behalf of the state of Israel. If any one of you would like to review it, to see it, there is a recording of that. I'll be happy to share it with whomever wants it. And finally, at least for now, I have produced a video on a prayer for the soldiers of the state of Israel that I have sent to both Debbie and Christina. And I don't know, please feel free to share with anyone in the community that would like to see it.
Yes, we will share that. We wanted to double check with you, so definitely we would love to share that. And it was so touching and moving last night. I recommend that everybody take a look at Cantor Ramón's recording, and the music was just so beautiful. It was a number of cantors from the DC, Maryland area, and it was really, and they did get a lot of money. I was really surprised. There were over 500 people that they said were in attendance, like 350 in person and the rest on Zoom. And they did collect quite a bit of money to send to the Israeli defense, that's what we have to do. That's how we help. So definitely take a look at it.
So lovely. So let me say that this afternoon rather, we're going to be discussing one that, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful Psalms is Psalm 30. I'm going to share the screen so you can see it. And of course, let me know. We're going to begin singing a little bit. What you have in front of you is I have translated and transliterated a few of the verses, and we're going to learn this melody just to warm us up before we discuss the psalm. It goes like this. Let me see. Probably I should have, before I do this, I should have put my musicians on, right, Christina? Um, eh, but not share the sound. we've been practicing with Christina, and I hope this is all making things a little better for all of us. Here it goes. Ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la, ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la la la, ya ya la, ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la la. So, Elecha Adonai Ekra Vel Adonai Etchanan. One more time. Elecha Adonai Ekra Vel Adonai Etchanan. Second melody. Shema Adonai Vechoneni Adonai Ozerli. And repeat. Shema Adonai Vechoneni Adonai Ozerli. Let's go from the beginning one more time. Elecha Adonai Ekra Vel Adonai Etchanan. Elecha Adonai Ekra Vel Adonai Etchanan. Shema Adonai Vechoneni Adonai Ozerli. Shema Adonai Vechoneni Adonai Ozerli. And for those of you intrepid that would like to know one more melody, we're going to use the second and third lines and go like this. Shema Adonai Vechoneni Adonai Ozerli. And repeats. Shema Adonai Vechoneni Adonai Ozerli. Ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la la la, la la, ya la la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la. So this is a melody that is taken from a number of the verses of his. I'm gonna stop the share and stop the musician's original sound because I know that actually creates an echo. And I'm going to go back this time. I'm going to go back to the text and let's begin analyzing it together. So let's see. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you is about the Psalm 30 that is normally entitled by its first line, Mizmor Shir Chanukat Habayit LeDavid. Let's see what that means. The word Chanukat is familiar to you, I'm sure, because it's what do you remember? What does it sound like? Anybody, you can unmute and tell me what this Chanukat means to you.
Hanukkah.
Thank you very much. In fact, this is the psalm that is recited during Hanukkah. I want to say, give me a second, I'm going to close my door. In fact, you remember that every day of the week has a psalm assigned. There is a psalm for Shabbat, of course. There is a psalm for Rosh Chodesh, for the beginning of the month. There is a psalm for Pesach, for Passover, and for every major holiday. And Hanukkah has its own. And Psalm 30 is, in fact, the psalm for Hanukkah. This is not only the psalm for this holiday, a minor holiday, admitted, but also is a psalm for the dedication of a house, of a synagogue. Why would that be so? Because the word Hanukkah means dedication, right? Hanukkah means dedication. So in fact, this is a song or a poem, Shir, Chanukat Habayit LeDavid, translated sometimes a psalm of David or to David. We discussed last week that the Psalms, the book of Psalms, all of them, the 150, are traditionally associated with King David, who's called Ne'im Zemirot Israel, the pleasant voice of the Jewish people, because according to tradition, he has written all the Psalms. So for this reason, this first line, this first verse, is in some communities, Sephardic communities and communities from the Middle East, is not said during the regular times that we sing, that we chanted, but only during those cases that I mentioned. That is for Hanukkah and for the dedication of a building, dedication of a house, at your house. You know that there is a dedication where we put mezuzot, with right, and that is the time where this psalm is actually recited. Let's see, what does it have to do with all this? I also had another reason of why I wanted to bring this psalm. Originally, I felt of it that it was a powerful response to the pandemic. You see that I wrote in here. Clearly now, after October 7th, we have many other reasons to recite it. And I'm going to say why. I'm going to move a little bit farther down and show you one of the verses 6, and in the middle of that verse, we read the words Ba'erev Yalin Bechi Velaboker Rena. Let's see what that means. We may lie down weeping at nightfall, in the evening. but at dawn, joy erupts. What does it mean to you? Any thoughts?
Hi, it's Sherry.
Hi, Sherry.
So I just want to tell you that I started reciting Psalms 8 years ago because I got sick and I felt like I needed to do something. And because of when you're sick and you have an illness, sometimes you feel very helpless. And so Psalms, I started reciting Psalms, and through the past 8 years, I've been afflicted with a lot of different things. And I come in and out of Psalms and read them on a daily basis when they are feeling like they're pertinent to me in my life. And so this Psalm 30, I started reading on a daily basis, I would say about 4 months ago, because as you know, like I was very, very sick this past year, and I had this operation, and it says in this Psalm that Hashem healed me. And so this Psalm really spoke out to me. And then so I feel that when you say in the evening you lie down weeping and in the morning you wake up with joy, that this is so, to me it speaks so loudly, because there were many nights during my illnesses where I was so sick during the night, and then I would wake up and I would feel better and I would be joyful. And I feel like the nighttime for me has been, especially these past 2 years when I was so sick. And then the morning is now after my operation and I am healed. And so that to me is so meaningful, and why I'm so happy you're doing this particular psalm, because it is a psalm that I do recite for myself every day. And I've, since I've been healed from my operation.
Thank you, Sherry. This is very, very moving, and I really, really love that you share that with us. It's really very, very special that you are here, and I'm glad that this psalm resonates with you. Let's expand a little bit of what Sherry was telling us, because indeed this is one of the psalms that is recited at times of sickness and illness, but as we will see, and I should say not bad, it's not only physical illness, even though those are powerful, but you see also about spiritual illnesses, as we are having now. I'm mildly depressed, and I'm sure many of you that can't stop watching the news or listening to them, you'll notice about, I don't have to repeat about the enormous tragedy that we are all experiencing as a body. But Judaism is a religion, a way of life that invites optimism. We would have never survived 3,000 years without the intention that there is something better out there. There is something more that we can aspire, and it doesn't matter how many pogroms, and it doesn't matter the Nazis, and it doesn't matter, there is always more. And there are some that people that actually read that ba'erev yalin bechi, that in the evening we cry. They translate, read this, the Shoah, read this, the Holocaust. Velaboker rina, and in the morning joy erupts, read the state of Israel. And so many other things. Sometimes when we talk about the nightfall or the night, right, is dark, not in vain, kids do not want the parents to turn off that light when they go to sleep, right? There is a sense of vulnerability. There is a sense of that something, right? It talk about it both in physical terms, but also figuratively, the night of our lives, think about moments in your life that things were not going the way you wanted them, where it felt that there was no solution. But at dawn in the morning, there was an answer, and that answer was an answer that gave us hope. And let me go back to those words that that we sang together. I have them right in here. Is verse 9. Elecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai et Hanan. I call to you, God, and you have, I implored you, right? And the answer is, of course, that God intervened and God answered us. Now, I want to take you, as you see in my notes here, I want to take you to the second book of the Torah, of the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, where slavery occurs. Yes, you remember that the children of Israel are in the land of Egypt. Again, you can think about it, Egypt physically, or the Egypt of the slavery that so many experience. And you may ask, and you may be right to ask, why is that God allows the Israelites at the time, Jews later, to be in slavery, according to some for 240 years, according to others for 400 years? In slavery, it takes so long to get to that chapter 15, where we actually, if you recall, the children of Israel after the Makot, you remember this from the Seder, from the Passover Seder, that we have the Makot, we have those tragic punishments to the climate and to the people of Egypt, right? And Pharaoh was hardening his heart and not letting them go, but eventually it happens. And when it happens, if you recall, the armies of the Egyptians go chasing the Israelites. The waters of the Red Sea open up, they cross, but they close up again after them. And so that is the time where we sing. That was the time, Bela Boker Rina. This is the moment when the morning we erupt in joy, not in too much joy, because it had a very steep price, and that's the killing, if you want, or the dying of so many Egyptians, that even though we were chasing us with the intention of killing us, they're still human beings. And at some point, when we discuss Passover, perhaps I will tell you more about this moment. But here's the part that I wanted to tell you, is that it's only in the 6th chapter of that book is that something happens. The children of Israel cried out. Only then God intervened. Only then, when the children of Israel realize the enormous difficulty of living in slavery and aspiring to something better, only God created the conditions for them to be freed. To be freed. And that invites us also into our own lives, yes? What happens many times is that we don't have a conscious understanding of what's going on to us. This is not a conscious understanding. We don't realize that we are in this limbo. We just keep going on it and keep making the same mistakes and keep knocking the same walls and being hurt. And until we're able to cry out and say, I really want something else, whether it is because of alcoholism, because of drugs, or for anything else, right? That one is feeling almost captive, if you want, by your circumstances, by our circumstances. It gets to a point that we say, I have enough of this. I want a better life. And then, yes, we cry it out and we ask God to help us. It's not that God is going to do the job for us, but we're asking for the inspiration to see something different than what has been the constant for us that did not work. And that works, or at least that gives us the hope to try something else until we actually get out of the tunnel. So far here, you're going to notice that this is a psalm that is about moments of recovery from illness, the moment of change, dedicating a new home, right? There is constant like a roller coaster, yes, of being sad and feeling depleted, and all of a sudden finding hope and finding a new beginning. Interesting that even for King David, this was a new beginning. According to the sages, if you recall, King David is not allowed to build the temple, right? Temple, a bait, right? It's also a house, a big T, a temple with a big T. He's not allowed to build it. If you recall, it's only his son, yes, that is going to be allowed to be King Solomon, Melech Shlomo, who's only going to build it. And since King David is not able to build it, he writes this psalm as a dedication to the house, somehow saying, when this temple is built, this is what you should see. If you remember, the Levites were the singers of the temple, and they will actually sing this psalm. And it's something very interesting that Malbim, one of the sages, what does he say? He says, the entire psalm was crafted to give thanks for David's recovery from illness or from ours. And he says there is no connection in it to dedicating a house. You say, wait a minute. It says this very clearly. This is a song for the dedication of the house. So you know that in Judaism, there are always different levels of understanding. You're not only, it may be that the pshat, that the literal understanding of this is that in fact, this psalm is dedicated to the house, right? To dedicating a house. Malbim turns this around, and what does he say? This is the house is the body, is a metaphor for the body, from our physical body. But what resides in this body is the soul, the inner home for the person who dwells within it. Right? And he goes to say, because the soul is the real person, while the physical body is only, he says, a material home for it to dwell in. What a beautiful way of looking at a house and saying, our body is our home. In this home, there is so much that lives in it. and that's our neshama, our spirit. So there are many, many ways to read this particular thing. And I want to tell you something really, really interesting that has found that found almost by chance a few years ago as I was discussing Parashat Miketz. So you may remember the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis, that there is a time at almost the end of it where we discuss, I'm going to stop the sharing so I can see your faces, where we discuss the story of Joseph. We discussed the story of Joseph, and it happens during Hanukkah. Almost, I would say always, but it maybe somebody will remind me that perhaps one time or doesn't. But it's a fact that when we read this reading happens during Hanukkah. And why this is actually really telling? Because if you look at this psalm that is reciting during the holiday of Hanukkah, it is also telling us the story of Joseph. How so? Who can tell me how this psalm could actually be connected to the life of Joseph, called, according to the sages, Yosef HaTzadik, the righteous Joseph? Any ideas? Any thoughts?
It's Howard Narrow. I'm thinking Joseph at night has his dreams. And in the morning, he awakes to the light and shares those dreams.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful. There's so many things about him, isn't it? He's actually taken to what? To a pit by his brethren. I'm going to share the screen again. I want to show you the text of the psalm and see what happens. And in the verse 2, this is Aromimcha Adonai Kidilitani. God, I extol you because you have lifted me up and not let my enemies rejoice over me. So it's very interesting because this word dilitani comes a word called dli. I have it in here so you can see. There, you know that Hebrew has roots. So dalet, lamet, yud, right? That brings the word dli, which means a bucket. And think about it. Dilitani means that there is a bucket. Imagine it, that Joseph was in that bucket and God lifted him up from what? From the pit, from the bore. So you have drawn me up, Joseph says, and we say, because you have taken me, rescued me from this confinement. Remember, the pit is like it's again, you can read of it as physical, a physical pit, but also as what? As the pit of our sad
Despair.
Say that?
The pit of despair.
Thank you so much, Christina. Yes, the pit.
Princess Bride reference. I don't know.
Oh, that's exactly right. Right, that's exactly right. So
Like you're always stuck in there and there's no way out, and that's everything, you know, your entire world, but there's that world above it.
yes. And even though sometimes you feel that it wasn't, you don't know how it happened. You don't know how it happened that you got into the pit. And all of a sudden, if you look around, people say, see, I told you. See, this is why you're not succeeding. See, there is nothing you can do. that's what the verse calls my enemies. Why my enemies? Because they are really not looking to lift me up. They're just telling me what I already know. I've been in a bad marriage. See, you didn't know how to do things better. You had an exam and you failed it, and what do they tell you? See, that's because you don't study. So how is that helping you? Not very much. So so the verse says it, and God, you provide me the inspiration to enter a new place, and by doing that, you drawn me up, you lift me up, and now I have gratitude towards you. And that's part of what happens here. There is a psalm that says there's a lot that happened to me, and yet I'm able to come out of that, and I'm not alone. And this is one of the very, very important things that happened around this psalm. The idea that even if we are alone, remember, loneliness is perhaps the greatest of the difficulties of these illnesses that we have in our world today. So many people that even die alone. No one even know for 2-3 days that they fell on their flat, and no one knows until it's too late. But sometimes people that we never call, and they are just going on their own. And some people that choose to say, I don't want the synagogue, I don't want a place, I don't want to belong, I just want my own thing. And then one day it comes. And the psalm continues with these words, Adonai Elohai shivati elecha batirpaeni. What great words. Adonai, my God, I cried to you, and you healed me, right? And you healed me. A description, healing, of being renewed, replenished, right? This idea, and it goes on verse 4, where it says, Adonai elita min sheol nafshi, you have brought me from the sheol of my soul. What does it mean? That you have lifted me up. Remember the word aliyah, meaning the word aliyah, the word of ascending. And in this case, I didn't do it on my own. I mean, yes, I did it on my own, but you helped me out. I had this Sheol. Sheol in Judaism is this very, very dark place. And the psalm says, this is not a dark place, God knows where, far away from me. This is the darkness of my soul. And it says, Chi itani, you preserved me, right? But also you made me live, from the word chai, right? From the word chai, you brought me, you gave me life. You renewed my life. And where? Mi yordi bor. Laredet is the opposite of la'alot. In other words, you ascended me because I went down, where I fell, right? Where did I fail? Where did I fall? I fell on that, into that pit, into that bore, the same one perhaps that Joseph reminded us. And perhaps now we understand why Joseph is called Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the righteous, because in fact, he is the kind of person that we could in our lives say, oh, you know, I'm in this bad place because so many bad things happened to me. So what do you expect? He is able to transcend that. He's taken to Egypt. He's taken to prison. He's there. He could bear grudge of his brethren, and yet at some point, for the power of teshuvah, of repentance, he's able to forgive them. So this is also about forgiveness. How so? Sometimes we have a grudge. Somebody really hurt us. And what we don't know is that little steadily, and it sometimes doesn't happen immediately, it happens at times, is that we begin to descend into that pit, into that Sheol of our soul, because we can't forgive. We can't forgive. And what it's saying is, we find ways, sometimes by reciting the Psalms, sometimes by finding inspiration of them, finding both, right? If you recite them, the chance of thinking about all these issues is actually much more personal and much more in front of our lives. And so King David says, you have lifted me up from that Sheol of my soul. You took me out of the pit. So does Joseph. And guess what happens on verse 5? Zamru l'Adonai chasidav vehodu lezecher kodsho. Those that chasidim, those faithful to you, God, sing to you and praise your name, your holy name. And how so? Because singing is one of those avenues that we have to lift ourselves up. This is one of the reasons why music is so vital. And this is, by the way, why many times, I'm sure you all know, that music therapy can be so powerful to so many that are at hospitals, and they are in a moment of Sheol, of their souls are really at the pit. We are able to help them out. I can tell stories even about going to hospitals and singing for people, and not necessarily that they recovered because of my singing, but that singing, they said later, helped them uplift themselves in some way to come back. So the next of the verses that comes now, it's a verse that is hard to understand, but I think powerful as well. It says, Ki rega be'apo, for a moment God is angry. Birtzono ba'erev, right? And when pleased, love appears, right? Meaning the same idea of the verse that we were discussing this before. In the evening there is crying, but in the morning joy erupts. Sometimes, of course, God is not a person, and we don't know God's feelings. How could we dare, right? There is no anthropomorphic way for Judaism to interpret God, and that's why we do not dare to imagine God in some way or fashion, visually, right? So much of Jewish art is abstract for that reason. We realize that sometimes things go awkward, and we say God is angry at us. It's a way to say something, I don't know, there was an earthquake, there was a flood, people die, we're saying, what happened, God? Why did you abandon us? But somehow we again, our hope and our optimism says, but God is not an angry God. And you may, I'm going to stop the sharing to say something about that, if I could. I don't know why. Oh, there it is. Yes. So you may say, but I read the Torah, and it's so many occasions of armies and so many occasions of bloodshed and violence. Is that the God? The militaristic God? Is that God? And what I want to tell you is that the Torah alone is not the full wisdom of Judaism. The sages go to great extent to explain the Torah, and for that they find new meanings and different understandings, to the point that they say, if the court of law shed blood, our hands are full of it forever. The idea of sparing blood is something that is, for the sages later on, an element that one cannot aspire. And then you say, but what happens? I see the horrific cases of Gaza, right? Where so many people are dying, and we are so sad for that. And we wish that it would stop. And whether you think that a ceasefire is what necessary, and we can talk about things like Hamas putting armaments and tunnels and all kinds of things under hospitals and under schools and under places where people are living. They consider them just a necessary way to hold war. Its troubling, however, is something that we would like to avoid at all costs. But we believe that definitely it's war and bloodshed is not the answer. So verse 7 continues, Vani amarti veshalvi bal emot leolam. And now that I was at peace with myself, with shalva, I was untroubled, I thought I will never, ever be shaken. Adonai b'rotzoncha, God, with your wish, matzah, you have strengthened me. Like, how will you compare how much you strengthened me? Lehareri oz. You strengthen me as oz is strength, right? Of lehareri. The word har is a mountain. As a mighty mountain, that's how strengthened. I feel strong like that. And yet, istarta fanecha, when you hid your face, ha'iti nivhal, I was terrified. And the word histarta, the rabbis say, it sounds like Esther. If you remember the book of Esther, right? What's the book of Esther about? Again, the Jewish people that are going to be annihilated. They're going to be murdered completely. We will be destroyed forever. And somehow, even though the name of God is not included in the name, in the word, in the book. It's like God is behind everything. And so Queen Esther comes and her uncle Mordecai, and they plot against Haman, and that's how we are saved one more time. But the psalmist, but David says, even though you strengthen me as a mountain, when you hide your face, I don't know what to do with myself. I want to stop for a second. I want to ask you, what does it mean to you that God hides God's face? It's a very powerful image. We have it too during the high holidays, very much. What does it mean to you? Have you ever experienced the impression that maybe God hid God's face?
In my eyes, sometimes when I hear that, it's God wants you to figure it out and you to use your powers to get to where you need to be.
How beautiful, Devi. Because what you're saying by this is not that God hides God's self or God's face as a retreat, but rather that there is something called tzimtzum, becomes small, if you were, invisible. So then we decide to use the power within us to come out and make the resolution of whatever it's necessary to achieve wellness, right? And look at what happens now. Thank you for that. That's really important. So the rabbis have a very interesting look into that. They say, what's this idea of being strong as a mountain, right? And they claim that the mountain is Har Sinai, the Mount Sinai, where we receive the Torah. So what does it mean? That God strengthens us. How does God strengthen us? As a mighty mountain, meaning providing us a blueprint of how to live our lives. In other words, when we live according to that blueprint called the Torah, when we are doing that, we strengthen ourselves. When is that God hides her face? When does it happen? When we look into idols. Now you remember what happens in the story, right? Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, goes to Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. And during that time, people didn't know what to do with themselves. And what is that they do? Anybody?
They prayed to idols.
They actually, yes, they pray to idols. They create the golden calf, right? They use all those beautiful materials, all that were once used to praise God. And what do? They melted to create an idol. Now, if you say, oh, but that wasn't me, I didn't do it. So replace the word idols for anything you want. Publicity, money. I mean, we can go on and on and on and on, right? Beauty. All that's things that when not that we don't need it. It's not, I'm not advocating here that money is not necessary. And Judaism advocates that it's actually, we pray for sustenance. It's when we want too much of it at the expense of tzedakah, the expense of helping others, at the expense of making sure that this world is a little better, right? Well, we take and take and take and take, right? And then we leave the place completely empty. I don't know if you happen to look at PBS sometimes. I'm going a publicity for PBS. So there is this great documentary about the buffalo and how when people started to see that the buffalo was giving them a lot of money, that was being paid really well, a buffalo in America that was almost the national animal, right? What happened to it? It was decimated to a point that everybody thought there was no more. That is the golden calf. When we realize that we're going to take whatever from the land until there is nothing left and I don't care. That's the golden calf. So anyway, so it's interesting, isn't it? That this whole idea about strengthen me is about values, about how I stand in life, and when God's face is hid, is about the impossibility of living in a world that only seems to be destructive. And so when we are in that moment, we say those words that we sung, Elecha Adonai ekra ve'el Adonai etchanan, that I call you God, I implore to you. And I go farther, where it says, Ma betza bedami veriti el shachat. What is to be gained when my dam, when my blood goes down to the pit from my descent to it, and then goes on to something that we always think, Hayotcha afar, would dust praise you? Hayagid amitecha, can it declare your faithfulness? And of course, it brings us to another of the Psalms, Psalm 118, that we haven't discussed, where it says, Lo hameitim yalelucha. God, understand that the dead cannot praise you. And then we say again, Shema Adonai v'choneni. God, have mercy upon me. Adonai hayeh ozer li, be my help. And we go, once we go into this transformation, Afachta mispedi lemacholi. What words? Hesped is what we say when somebody died. And you changed that lament, that moment of incredible sadness, lemacholi, into dancing. Pitachta saki, you opened my sackcloth, vateazreni simcha, and surrounded me with joy, hopefully with universal joy. And this is what I want to wish to all of us. May we have the capacity to transform terrible circumstances into the potential of peace, of wholeness. As the prophet Isaiah says, to turn the guns, the iron into agricultural tools, into something that brings prosperity and beauty to our lives. May it be the case that at this moment where we are feeling so depleted, we can find, I hope this is one of them, moments where we can transcend this moment of great pity and sadness into the potential of looking out, as one of the Psalms says, 121, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Meaning, may I have the capacity to look farther and see that there is happiness, hopefully, since we ask for big universal happiness and hope, especially when we feel that there is no way out, when we feel that we are in that pit, in that bowl, and we can't get out of it. May the shadows recede and light returns. So I want to wish Shabbat Shalom to everyone. I hope that you join me next week as we're going to be looking into a different psalm, Psalm 23, where we're talking about what happens when we walk on the shadow of death, and how is it that we get out of that. So until then, thank you so much for being with me. Thank you to Christina for always being there when my Zoom skills falter me. And to Devi, who always provides me inspiration with her beautiful writing. So until then, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
להתראות.
Lehitraot. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. I just wanted to say one thing. It was very interesting, your analogy with the golden calf and the buffalo. I never saw that side of things, but that now that you open that up, that's very interesting.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I'm glad.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Okay. Be well. Bye-bye.